Let's just start with your introduction to cross-country skiing. Did you start in track? I mean, did you find skiing as a way to kind of cross-train? Is that how it started?
Well, I officially started cross country skiing because my family was into it. My dad put me on alpine skis the day after my first birthday. So my first turns were on alpine skis. But I started cross country at age 6 in the Anchorage Junior Nordic program in my hometown. And I actually had a couple of my aunts that were my coaches. One was an Olympian in cross country skiing in 1980. I have to admit, I didn't love it at first, but a wise coach told me if I skied up the hill, then I could go down off the jumps as many times as I wanted. So that kept me interested a little bit, just the play aspect of it. Ended up doing a lot of different sports growing up. I alpine raced for a bit. I did soccer. I got into running. And then in high school, I was big into running, and my running coach moved out of town and I needed a new training group. So I ended up meeting a 3-time Olympian who was starting a new Nordic program in town. And he had a vision for a way American skiers could actually be successful internationally. And initially I jumped in just really for training, but ended up finding that it really combined all the things I loved about the other sports. The 2002 Olympics were 3 years away at that point, and I was really intrigued about making an Olympic team. And then once I competed in Salt Lake, then I was really excited about the future of cross-country skiing and going after America's first women's medal.
And you spent time in the Salt Lake City area. How important was that when you were actually representing?
Well, I was born in Salt Lake City. My mom was going to law school at the University of Utah. So it felt kind of cool to be going to my first Olympics in my birthplace. It was also nice that we were the home team. So we marched into the opening ceremonies as the last team to a big roar. A lot of friends and family were able to come out and be on course. And it was a venue that I had spent the previous 2 years getting to know, both through my first national championship and my first World Cup experience, were all test events leading in. So I was very familiar with the venue, and I knew I was at those Olympics mostly to gain experience. Although it was hard not to get caught up in the Olympics is kind of all about medals. And my best result at those games was 44th. So it really took a lot of kind of mental strength and being satisfied with my own effort versus comparing other people's expectations to really come out of those Olympics inspired and not feeling like I would never make it anywhere.
And then do you think that there's a distance track to cross-country skiing pipeline? I mean, do a lot of cross-country skiers get into it that way, or do they start in winter sports?
There are instances of cross-country runners that get into cross-country skiing a little bit later, potentially like I did this will be a great way to stay in shape in the winter. Oh, actually, I'm pretty good at this. And oh, maybe I can build some upper body strength too. I do think a lot of the people that ended up making it in the sport, though, do start pretty young. I think the familiarity with the feeling of gliding on snow early is really important. The definition of cross-country skiing is 1/3 uphill, 1/3 downhill, and 1/3 flat. So you have to have the engine to go up the hill, but you also have to have the balance, the agility, the confidence to go down the hill as well. So it's a sport that you can certainly make it far in your fitness, but you will definitely spend more time developing the finer points of the technique and the confidence on the downhill to put together the full package, which you need for reaching the top level.
How does someone realize that they're good at cross-country skiing?
I don't think you ever fully feel like you're good at cross-country skiing. There's always something to be learned, something to be refined. But what I've felt is there's kind of a 10 session threshold. So you go out and maybe the first day your muscles are fresh. It's a new experience. You're like, oh, this cross-country thing is great. Yeah, it was a little hard going up the hills, but I love it. And then the next time you go out and you go, holy cow, this is a serious, hard workout. I mean, I'm working my whole body, all sorts of little muscles I didn't even know I had are aching. The balance is tricky and the coordination. And a lot of people, I think, end up hitting a wall there and go, well, that's not the sport for me. But if you can stick with it over a few sessions, so if you kind of say, I'm just going to commit to going out 10 times this year, and over that 10 times, I'm literally going to suspend judgment and go, I'm going to believe that every day I'm getting better. And sure enough, after 10 sessions, the body adapts to the feeling of being on a faster surface. You start to feel the coordination of the upper body with the lower body. And the physiology kind of starts to adapt to realize that you're putting a huge load on your system by integrating your entire body. But it's amazing how our bodies adapt to that. So I found, as well trained as I was through my career, the first time I got on snow, it took about 10 sessions before I felt comfortable. So that's the big key, is just kind of patience and building up, and then you'll just hit these breakthrough points.
Let's talk about your road to that first Olympics. Was it an easy one? I mean, did it live up to the expectation, or was it more difficult than you imagined?
You know, honestly, that first Olympics was a little bit of a fairy tale. It was a really quick road for me from the time I committed to cross country skiing at 16 and realized, like, whoa, like the first year out of high school is going to be trying to make an Olympic team. And they had just introduced a shorter event called the sprint. It was contested for the first time in 2002. And I believe that gave me a little faster track than I would have had the sprint not been in the games, because the sprint is a bit more based on your just raw power and speed, whereas the distance capability tends to take years to develop. It also happened that, you know, the women's field in the US is just not quite as deep as it is today. So it also opened the door for a younger athlete to come in. And I got to make that team, you know, at barely 19 years old, come in and really to make my first Olympic team so soon after setting that goal in a sport like cross country skiing was pretty cool. But then having become an Olympian, it was kind of like, well, I've done this now, so what's next? And that's where, standing in the crowd, watching the medal winners go up on the podium, I felt really inspired and driven to then say, okay, I want to compete for a medal someday. What's that going to take? And then as I sat down with my coach and he helped me understand the benchmarks I was going to have to clear, well, then all of a sudden it wasn't just going to be this, oh, I'm going to try hard and in 3 years I'm going to get my goal. It was like, this is actually a 10-year process. And I think because that first couple of years had gone so well for me, I was a little bit naive and ambitious as a young skier and went, well, I'm just going to work harder and I'm going to get there faster. But now I have the perspective of, actually, it did take about 10 years to just gradually build up my experience and my physiology until I was a contender at the world level.
I mean, you went to the next 4 Olympics. How did your lead up to those distinct challenges change as you not only matured as a person, but also as a skier?
So the most difficult period, I think, for me was between my first games and my second in 2006. So I had my 10-year plan. I started working on it. Kind of first benchmark was to compete against athletes my age at the under 23 world championships, start to gain World Cup experience. And about 2 or 3 years in, that was going okay. I was meeting a lot of those goals. But then at the 2005 World Championships, I was struggling. I think I finished almost dead last in one of the distance events. We had a women's team there, but she got pulled out of the relay because we were about to be lapped by Norway. So we didn't even get to finish. And then at the end of that season, all of the kids that I'd graduated from high school with were close to getting their university degrees. Meanwhile, I had managed to scrape together a couple of college courses. I wasn't making any money. I wasn't getting the results. And I was seriously questioning, A, whether I actually had a realistic future in the sport. And 2, was this the wisest decision with my time and energy for setting myself up for the future? So it was tempting to almost want to close it down right there. But because I had my roadmap and I just kind of felt compelled to say, let's go to one more Olympics. I've already put the work in for 3 years. I might as well see it through one more checkpoint. And then I'll know if there's a future there or not. And that next season, the season didn't start off super well. I didn't really know where I was at, but I ended up having a big breakthrough at the Olympics. I finished 9th, which was actually ahead of my initial goal of finishing top 20. So that was a big breakthrough. That gave me some opportunities to race World Cup at the end of the season, where I got a top 5. And all of a sudden, I was now on track with my plan. And so that was, to reflect back on that point, it was like, wow, if I had finished the 2005 season and gone, well, I guess that's a wrap, and kind of walked away, I may have missed out on the incredible future I've ended up having. So it's funny when you can go back and look at those points where, gosh, a decision either way could have drastically changed my life.
And then on the World Cup, the World Championship experience, you have every medal. You have a gold, you have a silver, you have a bronze. And they're kind of spread out in the last 2 decades. I mean, what has changed for you?
Well, championships are always an interesting beast, because that is when every athlete in the world is trying to be at their best, whether it's the World Championships or the Olympics. And it's usually a week to 2 week long period in your entire season. And so you sit down in the spring, potentially years out, or even leading into that season, and you go, okay, I'm going to try to tailor my training so that I'm hitting my absolute peak fitness on those dates. Well, it's throwing a dart at a very small target far, far away. And when you come to the championships, little things can either make you really on or really off. And we also have the weather conditions to deal with in our sport. We also have 2 techniques. And for me personally, I was really strong at the skating technique, or the freestyle technique. And for the classic style, that requires a little bit more technique and finesse. And I could hit it really well in certain conditions, but certain conditions, it was like I was learning to ski. And so depending on, and I also was better at the shorter event versus the longer event. So the way all those line up, there's actually less opportunities than you would think. There's not an opportunity necessarily every year for my best event, particularly at the Olympics. So the sprint, 2002, it was skate. 2006, it was skate. And then after 2006, they said, well, maybe we should start alternating so that every skier gets a chance kind of at their best event in the short distance. So then in 2010, it was a classic sprint. So I have I have a top 10 in 2006. I should be on track to compete for medals. Well, in 2010, if it had been a skate sprint, I would have absolutely been competitive for a medal. But in classic, I had never broken the top 12 up to that point, which meant making into the semifinals. So I ended up finishing 8th in 2010 in the classic sprint, which was an incredible breakthrough for me, but it wasn't a medal. So then I had to wait till 2014 to then have another chance at a skate sprint. And the same thing was happening at World Championships. So 2009, I win a silver medal, first ever women's World Championship medal for the American team. Super exciting, skate sprint. In 2011, I actually was a medal favorite, and I unfortunately got caught in a crash and got eliminated in the quarterfinals. So, and that was like another skier that took me out, something I couldn't control. Then, we have the 2013 World Championships, back to a classic sprint, because then the 2014 Olympics. So it was just this like trying to do your best to make good on the opportunities you had, but not necessarily always timing the right format on the right day with the right fitness, and just so much goes into it. So the beauty of having a long career is over 2 decades. Thankfully, I did get many chances, and on some of those, I was able to really capitalize and win medals. And I mean, prior to my career, no American woman had ever been top 10 at a World Championships, top 10 at Olympics. And we certainly had never been competitive in relays. And so it's pretty cool to walk away from my career with 3 World Championship medals, with an Olympic medal, with 3 overall World Cup Crystal Globes in sprint, and just go, holy cow, like that wasn't even supposed to be possible. And now the skiers are taking it to even greater heights. So it's a pretty cool change in trajectory.
You were talking about the lifespan of your career. Is that kind of the 2-decade mark just kind of what the lifespan normally is, or did you hyperextend it?
I think I'm a little bit of an outlier there. I would say it does take seems to take around that 10-year mark to reach the amount of training and experience you need to truly be competitive at the top level. Some athletes can hit that sooner because, I think early on in my career, we were figuring out how to train. And we were figuring out the support system. And so it took a long time to kind of gradually build up and get those results. But then as soon as I did get those results, it boosted the confidence and belief, and it opened the door. And so now the younger athletes coming through, they don't kind of have to wonder if it's possible. They have an example. So they just automatically come in with more confidence, plus the things that I've learned through training. About halfway through my career, I started making friends on the World Cup and getting to go over to Europe and train with some of the European teams. So I learned some things about training. We also innovated some things with the American team on our own training. And so all that coming together was this kind of, long, slow build. And then after 2014, I decided I didn't want to stop racing, but I was excited to start a family. So I took a season off from racing in 2016. I had my son Breck, and I came back and got 2 more years. And there's not a lot of women, and no American women that I know of really, that have done that. So that also kind of gave me a little extra extension, because for some women, it's almost a decision of, am I going to race or am I going to have a family? And I was curious to see if I could do both. And I'm happy to say it worked out really well. I returned to a very high level of performance, and I had a wonderful time merging that with my intro to parenthood. And I would highly recommend it. It wasn't cheap. It took a lot of resources to make it happen, to bring my family on the road, but it was an incredible experience. And I hope that there are some women out there who, if they're enjoying skiing, if they still feel like they're progressing, they shouldn't have to decide it's skiing or family, because you can do both.
How do you feel about the term pioneer? Because I think that on paper, you are the perfect definition.
Well, growing up in Alaska, we used to have Pioneer Day at school, and we'd get all dressed up in our like gold panning gear and come to school all dressed up. So it's fun it was always fun for me to imagine cross country skiing as this open frontier of just, why not try? Why not explore? Let's see what we can do. What have we got to lose? And it's been really fun to be the first to break through on some of these levels, and then to see these young men and women then coming up behind and seeing that belief and seeing their passion for the sport. So I feel incredibly fortunate that I got to fulfill that role, because in a way, now that the bar has been set so high, these young athletes coming in, while they have more support and they have more knowledge and confidence, they also have higher expectations, whether that's what they put on themselves internally or kind of what people have expectations for them externally. And I kind of got to gradually inch my way up and hit those breakthroughs one at a time. So 2 different paths.
Which do you think has more pressure put on them? You setting the bar, or them trying to attain it?
I think there's way more pressure for them trying to attain it, because in a way, there wasn't a lot of pressure on me externally. Internally, I knew what my goals were, and I knew how I wanted to perform, and I was inching my way up. And for me, it was kind of like a bouncing ping pong ball. I would get a high result, but then I might go back to the back of the pack the next weekend. And so I just hope that over time, the ping pong ball kind of oscillated upwards. And so I certainly had, felt pressure, felt disappointment when I'd have a big result and then maybe go down to a little bit lower. But I kind of knew that it was just going to take some up and downs to get where I wanted to go. And that with all the training and experience, my consistency would get better over time. And the same is true for the young athletes coming in. They're still going to do the ping pong. They might be hitting a higher point early on, but they're still going to have some low points. And it's just going to take that time to gradually bring that oscillation to a smaller and smaller margin. And so I enjoy trying to mentor them a little bit and just say, hey, really focus on the effort you gave, always finding some things you did well, and always thinking of things you want to do better, and then having a good plan around how you're going to make those changes. But don't live or die by your results, because this is a long game in this sport. And You got to do it because you enjoy it, and your personal satisfaction is ultimately what you're left with at the end of the day. Like, even if you have a shiny medal with you, if you gave everything you had, or if there was a little bit left, if you backed down from the challenge or you embraced it. And, ultimately, I think that's why we really do this, because that's where you really feel alive.
Backing down from the challenge or living up to the challenge requires not only physical, but also mental. When you were starting out, what was the conversation surrounding the mental piece of that? Was it a dialogue yet, or were you having to kind of traverse that in your own mind?
Well, the dialogue has always been there. I mean, it's there for all of us. You can get better at kind of tuning in and recognizing that it is in fact the dialogue that can be steered. There are certain days when, you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and maybe physically you don't feel great. And, mentally, maybe the negative voice kind of starts to win over. It starts to remind you of how hard this is and how good your competition looks and how much pressure there is. But over time, I got better at recognizing what was helpful and what wasn't. And when I felt those expectations really building up, to just kind of bring it back to what I could control right in front of me. And that was, well, I can do my training today. I can do my warm up today. I can make sure my skis are ready. If I'm in a race, I can literally focus on the 100 meters right in front of me and not think about the 9 other kilometers I have to race at this point. So you just get really good at playing games with yourself. I also got to do a mental sports skills training when I was on my first few years in the national team. And that was helpful because we got introduced to all the different types of mental training there are. It's goal setting, it's relaxation, it's getting your nerves at just the right point, it's positive self-talk, it's visualization. So because I got a broad education on all those things, then I was able to start picking and choosing what things worked best for me. And it's a mental battle always. Like even up to my 5th Olympics, my 17th Olympic race, the whole day, we didn't race till 5 p.m. in the evening. So the whole day I'm like, it's all self-talk. It's all, okay, we're ready, stay loose, have fun, enjoy your teammates, do what you need to do, eat the right things, but just not focus on the medals, just focus on, I'm going to go out there and execute my plan and ski the best I can. And I'm going to be ready for anything. And so you just get a lot of practice. And what I've realized is that those skills were really important in sport, but those are the same skills we all use in everyday life. When we've been going through COVID together, I mean, so much out of our control, so much you could get overwhelmed with, get negative. And yet I use those same skills to kind of recognize the conversation in my mind, to pull myself back into the moment and focus on things I could control, and to always stay hopeful that the future will be good.
I mean, when you're going through a race as long as cross-country skiing is, what's going through your mind at each of the individual parts of the race, like beginning, middle, end of middle, and then once you cross the finish line? I mean, how is your positive self-talk or negative self-talk changing as you progress through the races?
I think early on, you're really just trying to kind of set yourself up and remind yourself that the preparation is there, that you have the strategy, that you're going to kind of, work your way into the race. So even if the first kilometer doesn't go great, you can always kind of think of every piece of the race as a new opportunity. As you progress into the race, of course, the physical exertion gets higher and higher. And so you then have to get really good at literally talking yourself through 10 seconds at a time. Sometimes you get super methodical. You're like literally counting your strides or repeating a word over and over to yourself. And then in that last bit, you're really just trying to say, like, I got to get everything else out. I know my body is screaming at me to literally stop. And I'm like, going to say, no, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to try to go faster, and just push. And, yeah. And I mean, the mind wanders all over the place. It's never 100% positive. And even in the toughest days, it's never 100% negative. And even if it is going in the really negative direction, I always tried to kind of like catch it and just reset. And so the beauty of a cross-country ski race is you really are in your head. You really are out there for a while, but you get to work through it. And now that I'm done racing and I don't race every single weekend, I'm kind of going, man, I miss that challenge, because you just don't leave the day with the same satisfaction that you do when you put yourself in a race. You also don't get the endorphins either, which is kind of a letdown, but it was a really special thing to be able to race at that high level every weekend, and to have done so much preparation so that my body and mind was just so tuned and ready to go.
And then when you were racing with other people, how did that change the preparation style?
Uh, um, ski, I always enjoyed the head-to-head racing versus being just against the clock. And but you never know how your competitors are going to react. So you hear a lot of sports, like an alpine racer, they're the only one on course at one at a time. So they literally can visualize every single turn and how they're going to do it. And in cross country skiing, you can kind of visualize how you think it might go. But if someone goes hard off the front, or if people are playing tactically, or if you get boxed in, or you crash and have to get up, you kind of prepare, but you're also prepared to be ready for anything. And that's what I loved about head-to-head racing, is you never knew exactly what you were getting into. So the cool part about cross country skiing is it had a little bit of everything. It had those days when it was just like you against the clock. You were maybe getting some indication of how your competitors were doing, but you knew it was close. You knew every second counted. So you just had to go like crazy.
And then you were inducted into the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame in 2011. That's insane. That's amazing. Did you expect that?
It felt a little funny to me to come when my career was still really hitting its stride. And I teased the guys. I'm like, well, you're gonna have to update that plaque every year, because I still have plans. And it's still a running joke between us. An incredible honor to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Growing up in Alaska was an incredibly unique experience. Alaska doesn't have the in-house professional sports teams like most other places in the US. So the Olympians here are really celebrated. And I had incredible role models growing up. And so now to be in the Sports Hall of Fame with many of them it's such an honor. And I just am hopeful and excited that there are young athletes strolling through there, looking at the pictures, and hopefully someday dreaming about being Olympians as well, because it really has been an incredible lifestyle and journey. And it's important to have heroes. I really believe that's it's inspirational really to everyone, whether you're trying to be that athlete or just trying to get out the door and be healthy. And so to be able to have the platform to inspire, it's a really cool part of my job.
Do you think of yourself as a role model?
I do. And I have to credit my parents early on for kind of implanting that idea of, you're having these success and people celebrate you, and that's great, but it also comes with responsibility. You have the chance to kind of set the tone and teach and show through this kind of crazy individual pursuit how we can all be at our best, and how it's never perfect. And you have to just kind of be patient and work hard, and you just have to have a good character. And I'm really glad to get that, because you see many athletes who have missteps, so many kids are looking up to them, and then they make one bad mistake, and and that can have a negative impact on kids that are looking up. So I tried to do my best to always set a good example. I did that with my younger teammates, and happy, again, here in Alaska, I have a really unique platform to inspire a lot of different types of people.
And we'll talk about your work now a little bit later, but right now we're going to go back to your teammates and talk about you and Jessie and your bond, and then seeing her compete in Beijing. I mean, knowing what you two have been through together, how amazing was that?
Well, I think the funniest part for me at this point is that Jessie's always been like the little sister on the team. We called her our sparkle chipmunk, because she just had so much youth and enthusiasm and energy and glitter. And now she's the veteran on the team. She's really stewarding this group of younger women and being a leader. And it's cool to see her having reached so many great performance heights, but also just being a great representative for the team and the sport, and then being that leader mentor. So having known her for yeah, almost 15 years at this point, and seeing her progression from like literally the first time I ever saw her, it was a ponytail bopping along in a junior national race. And I just kind of recognized that there was something unique about her energy. And she showed up a couple of years later on the world championship teams at 19 years old. And she's just always brought so much energy and dedication. And I think what she showed us all in Beijing is she is the grittiest racer out there. Like, she can dig into the pain cave deeper than anyone I've ever met. And she took on, both her and Rosie Brennan took on an ambitious schedule. They raced all 6 events, which I think was over 100 kilometers of racing by the end of the championships or something crazy. And of course, the conditions in Beijing were really challenging with the cold weather and the slow snow and the altitude. And just, they really just put their best foot forward every single day. Jessie came through with 2 medals. The relay teams were both kind of like incredibly close, agonizingly close to medals again, but not quite. And I just felt really proud and really happy for the athletes who have become just such great friends, to see them doing their best and getting through all the challenges and being these incredible inspirational role models. I was watching them race, like, got me inspired to go out and hit it hard on the treadmill after commentating those races. So
Yeah, I saw that NBC had hired you as an analyst. Did it feel, I mean, how did it feel to be on the other side of a race like that? I mean, because you're the perfect analyst.
Well, I was really curious how it was going to go. I mean, one, I've never had any official broadcast training or anything. And while I do enjoy public speaking, I think when you all of a sudden you're on a live show and you have to be able to describe what you're seeing to an audience that may know cross country skiing or they may not, and not stumble over yourself, to put thoughts together minute after minute after minute. And I also, Beijing was the first Olympics in 5 editions that I haven't been competing. So how was I going to feel finally being on the other side? But I'm happy to say that it really just all around was a wonderful experience. I felt very content in the racing that I've done, to the point where I can say, wow, great. I don't feel like I need to be out there racing. I'm really excited to watch the athletes do their thing and to be able to play another role in the sport and help share what's going on, because I can put myself in their shoes. I know exactly how they're feeling at this point in the race. I know these racers really well, having raced against a lot of them, knowing what's going on the skis, which are these kind of underlying stories. So I really enjoyed commentating, and I got to work with a really great team. Chad Samla, who is the other color analyst, he and I go way back, and he was really great at getting into some of the statistics and picking out things. I could speak a little bit more to the athlete perspective. And then Steve Schlanger, our play-by-play announcer, was always really good at setting the scene, really playing the conductor in our group. And the races just flew by. It was an adrenaline rush as much as it is racing, to call the races. And particularly to see the US team do so well, to have some of those agonizingly close finishes, to see some unexpected competitors come through. Just all around, it was really, really fun. And I've heard a lot of people that felt excited about it as well. So that just makes me happy for the sport of cross country skiing.
Let's go back to 2018 now. A gold medal in what would eventually become your last Olympics. Did you know at the time that it was going to be your last?
I did know that 2018 was going to be my last Olympics, and also my last season racing.
And then you had breast cancer, but you didn't know it.
Exactly. Yeah, that was that at the time of the Olympics. That was absolutely not anything close to on my radar. But yes, the cancer was definitely building inside my body at that point.
And then Mother's Day, I read, was when you realized that you had a problem. Stage 2. I mean, how I can't even put it into words. I mean, you had this amazing high of a gold at the Olympics, and then suddenly, before you could even really celebrate that, everything changed.
That was the frustrating part. I mean, of course, cancer is frustrating on many levels, but I'd come into the 2018 Olympics actually quite nervous, because I'd had a foot injury, stress fracture, and had spent the previous 6 weeks doing alternative training, not really racing, not proving to myself my fitness was there. And my teammates were all skiing really fast, which meant when it came down to who was chosen to ski each race, I wasn't sure I would get selected. So I went into those Olympics really holding my breath. Thankfully, I got an opportunity in the opening race. While it wasn't a spectacular result, it showed potential. And then literally every day in every race, I was improving, and my trajectory was clearly coming up. And so I got a call really at the last minute to be on the team sprint, and which was incredible news, but also a lot of pressure because that race was really stacked with some of the greatest athletes that have ever been in the sport. And we were kind of the underdogs, but we knew we could be in there. So we know what happens. We ended up winning the gold medal, got to finish my career on the highest of high notes. I mean, you can't write a story that good. So I was definitely on cloud nine. I also was just feeling so happy to wrap up my career and to be able to transition to the next chapter of my life. And my son Breck was 2 at the time, and we had just moved to Canada. So we were really had a fresh start and had the most wonderful Mother's Day, beautiful outside. I'm out on a hike with my husband and my son, and just like letting myself think, wow, life is just incredible right now. And very ironic that getting ready for bed that night is when I discovered just the smallest, almost pebble size lump on my chest, and thankfully had the education to know to get it checked right away. And it was about 2 weeks later that I learned it was aggressive breast cancer. And in an instant, my whole world changed, because you kind of get this feeling of invincibility as a physically strong, accomplished athlete. And then to suddenly think like this cancer is growing in my body, and there are treatments, but you just never know what's going to happen. So much was outside of my control. And to have a 2-year-old son at the time, I think it just really hits home of like, holy cow, am I going to be here as he grows up? And so that hit me all at once, but it was kind of crazy how reflexively I went right back into athlete mode. And I kind of said like, okay, what can I control? What can I not? I need a plan. I need a team. I'm just going to get through this. I'm, going to not let myself focus on the what ifs. And I was really lucky to have my family around me, and they were also really good at just keeping things kind of high level, positive. We caught it early, so we had a good prognosis. We had a treatment plan, and really just kind of like I would in a race, just switched my focus to like, okay, what do I need to do today? And just getting through it one step at a time. So I'm grateful to have had so much practice with the mental side leading into that.
6 rounds of chemo, a lumpectomy, a follow-up surgery, and 33 sessions of radiation. That's incredibly mentally taxing and physically taxing. I mean, what was going through your head when you knew that they had caught it early, but you still had work to do?
Yeah, it was a lot to think about. And I think any other major injury I'd ever encountered, there was always some way I could kind of outwork it. So if it was a foot injury, I could use my arms, or if I couldn't ski, I could be in the pool. And, through those injuries, there was a lot of times where I would feel a little hopeless, or I get a little down, or, but usually I could turn it around because I had something to focus on that I could do about it. And with cancer, I couldn't just outwill it or outwork it. I kind of just had to let it affect my body. But I knew staying active was going to be important. So I really tried to put my focus on keeping an open mind and trying to see what I could do, knowing that the goal was to give my body the energy it needed to fight this battle. So I wasn't trying to be like in top shape and break my body down, but I also knew that I responded really well to that daily stimulus of activity. So I kind of ahead of time tried to bake into my treatment plan ways to stay active. So I asked a lot of questions of all my doctors about, are there parameters, what can I do? What do you think about this? And that was really important because without asking those questions, I would have never gotten those answers. Like the way our system is set up, they talk about specifically the medication and the treatment, but they don't talk about how physical activity can play a role in that. So I decided I'd ride my bike to and from every chemo session, and the doctors felt comfortable with that. I would hit the gym on the way to the chemo session because I knew prior to getting hooked up to the IV that I felt pretty good. So I'd get the workout in knowing I was feeling good. And then I could just kind of be content to sit in the chemo chair and just go, okay, now I'm ready to ride out whatever comes. And my chemo sessions were spread out over 3 weeks. And so I would usually feel pretty rough for a few days, but I promised myself I would get out the door for at least 10 minutes of activity. And because I'd made that commitment to myself ahead of time, there were days when I was laying on the couch, feeling miserable. And the last thing I wanted to do was get outside. But I said, I made the promise. So I'd get up and I'd do 10 minutes. And after moving for 10 minutes, even if it was a slow walk around the block, usually I would talk myself into another 10 minutes. And one day it turned into 4 hours. Because I think the activity, just like moving, one, it was what my body was used to, but two, it gave my mind something to focus on besides how crummy I was feeling or what some of the worst case scenarios are, or the unfairness of it all, or all those emotions you're processing. It's like being active, it automatically helped my mind stay more positive. And so I tried to stay active through my treatment, and that really helped. And then I was also just really open and honest about what I was going through. And I think that was really good. Like I have a tendency, like I can put on a brave face and I can say, I'm fine, I've got this. But it was okay to admit, like, no, I'm struggling today. I'm having a hard time getting out the door, or I'm getting scared, or whatever it is. And I think being open about it was good, because almost when you say things out loud, you hear what you're saying, and then you kind of go, okay, but is that something I can control or not? Is that helpful or is it not? And then if you have good people around you too, if they hear a little bit of negativity or something in your voice, they can help you reframe it. Because I'll admit, I need help reframing sometimes too. And so being open was a real key. And I found that in my ski career too. If I tried to keep everything inside, it slowly eats you up. And the people around you care about you. They want to help. And I always find helpful in sharing. So between staying active and having the great team, that was all really important. And then I really just tried to surround myself with really positive messaging. And like literally I wore rainbow colored running shoes into my doctor's appointments. And those shoes ultimately inspired some really happy socks that I started selling through my website to help kind of promote this idea of, we do just need to believe it's going to be okay. And we're going to focus on the positive and getting through this. So some projects like that, and obviously the happy colors, like also really helped me kind of stay on track. And there were tough times, but 10 months of really intense treatment, and through it all, I think I came out of it like pretty darn well. I lost my hair, but there were some benefits to that in the hot summer. And when you get knocked down like that, when you come back up, it feels darn good. So I kind of feel like coming off my Olympic ski career, I probably would have complained that I'll never be as fit as I was. But because I've experienced cancer treatment so quickly after that, now every day is like, wow, well, this feels so much better than that did. So it's a pretty good day.
And then your pink hair started as a way to make skiing more fun in the same way that Jesse's glitter does. But now it's a reminder pink is kind of synonymous with breast cancer awareness. I mean, your hair takes on a different meaning now, does it not?
It totally does. I mean, it's so ironic because when I had pink hair pre-cancer, every so often I get asked, oh, are you supporting breast cancer awareness? And I would always reply, well, of course I am, but I don't have a personal connection to it. And my hair is pink for these other reasons. I was also really involved with an organization called Fast and Female that's all about getting girls into sports and keeping them in sports. And so pink has always been kind of this energy color for me and a way to show kind of the fun side. And so now that my hair has grown back and I get to put the pink back in again, it really is just kind of this representation to me of embrace the best and do your best every day, because that's all you have. And celebrate the joy and the fun part.
So how long have you been in remission?
I finished my really active treatment in January of 2019. I had to do a full year of one of the chemotherapy treatments, which ended in July of 2019. So here we are in 2022. So it's been, almost 3 solid years since I've really been out of active treatment, which is a great milestone. And really in that first year, I bounced back incredibly well. I mean, I ran the New York City Marathon in November of 2019, and ran a sub 3 hour time, which was my goal before I ever knew cancer was part of my story. So I was really happy with that. That just kind of taught me that I think staying active through my treatment was a big piece of that. But then just the motivation now when I'm out there pushing myself, it's like, this is a pain I get to control. And I know there's a good outcome from it. So I kind of then, it helps me embrace the pain a little bit and look for it, because I like challenging myself. So yeah, to bounce back for that result and really just get back into being active every day. Yeah, most times in the day, I don't even think about cancer as part of my story. Thankfully, although it is one of those things that it's always going to be part of my story, because cancer is never something you can be like, well, I dealt with that and now it's out of my mind. So I get checked every 6 months, and just try to keep doing those healthy lifestyle things that I had to do as an athlete to perform. And ironically now, really need to do to keep myself as healthy as possible. So I'm not perfect 100%. I also enjoy my things here and there, but at the end of the day, I keep, that's always kind of my goal. And yeah, I'm really grateful that 3 years later, I'm doing really well.
So you had no family history of breast cancer. So you really didn't have any preconceived understanding of the severity of what you were going through. Did that make it more difficult?
Well, I had a cross country running coach in high school who at age 38 had been diagnosed with breast cancer and had gone through treatments and had bounced back. She had 2 young children at the time. And I think having a really relatable role model like that in my own personal life gave me a lot of confidence early that, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And that helped because, yeah, there was nothing in my family. I really had no connection to it. So I learned a lot very quickly. And it turned, it's almost like learning a new language. Once you're in it, you realize there's all these things, but breast cancer affects 1 in 8 women, statistically. And while the cases under 40 are still a small percentage of that, of course, now that I've had it, I've ended up connecting with all sorts of women. I connected with Shantae Lowe, who is a Olympic high jumper. I think she went to 3 or 4 Olympics. She got it while she was actually training for the Tokyo Games, and ultimately made it darn close to coming back from her treatment and making that. So we connected early. I think she was a little bit after me, so I was able to pass along to her some of the things that I learned. I connected with a woman over on the East Coast, Lanny Silversides, who is like a women's basketball coach and, a great athlete in her own right. And so she had 2 young kids. And so we were able to share just a lot of similarities in our treatment. And then of course, like people appear, it's like friends, like all of a sudden I'll get a call, hey, my friend or my family member. And there's a lot of power in connecting, I think, with people you can relate to. And that's something that the medical community is still catching up on, because a lot of the materials are out there are for your like average patient, which, for breast cancer is going to be generally older, generally less active. And so it was really important for me to connect on what the experience was going to be like, more or less, for me versus your average patient. And I kept a video blog for 160 days during my treatment. It was just short clips every day of kind of how things were going. And I've heard that that's been actually really helpful for some people who are about to go into it or are supporting a family member through it. And even for me to go back and watch it, it's like, whoa, yeah, there were some tough days in there. But through it all, there were a lot of things that really helped me manage it well.
And I think I saw there was a video blog where you were talking about your hair and how you had just gotten it cut. And then you were like, psych, here's what we're dealing with. And through it all, your temperament seemed just like it is now. I mean, how has your overarching over kind of the past 2 decades, and then an emphasis on 2018 and to present, how has your motivation changed over everything that you've been through in the past 2 decades?
Well, I would love it if maybe, the universe would stop testing me quite so much. I feel like there have been a lot of big tests. But I think overall, if you go back to the whole like nature versus nurture conversation, I think, for me, nature baked in, there just is some sort of optimism, and just, continual like push, persistence, willingness to just kind of work through things. And so that's always been there. My parents have a story of me crawling, and they put me down in the grass, and there was a playground probably, I don't know, 100 meters away. And they thought, I'll crawl towards it for a while, then I'll probably turn back and look to them to see if they're coming to get me. And I guess I put my head down and I crawled all the way to the playground. It was like, once I saw the goal, I went for it. So that's been baked in, but I also have had incredible family and upbringing that has really, like, our motto in our family is Randall never gives up. You always give your best, regardless of what the result is. My dad encouraged me when I was going to soccer tournaments at 12 years old to bring postcards and make friends on other teams, make friends with your competitors. What a crazy idea. So I ended up with these pen pals. And then that inspired me when I got to the World Cup to go out and meet athletes from other countries who have become best friends now. So a lot of great people in my life that have helped teach me a lot of the great things that have given me this little toolkit in my mind to get through all sorts of things.
And then, I mean, while you were doing all of the cancer acknowledgement, like this is what the foreseeable future of my life is going to be like, you realized that your move to Canada reneged your health insurance. And then the Olympic Committee agreed to help you with that if you stayed and did your treatments in Anchorage. What was that conversation like?
Well, I was, but in a unique situation, potentially a very perilous situation, in that our recent move to Canada at that point, I hadn't even started applying for my paperwork yet, because it was like we had a rush through the season to even get there. And I really didn't anticipate I was going to have any major medical needs right off the bat. So I didn't qualify for the Canadian healthcare system in the town we were living in. I still had my coverage coming off of my career from the US Olympic Committee, and that was due to expire in the fall. So this is in May and June when I get my diagnosis. And so I was able to connect with the US Olympic Committee and the US ski team, explain my situation, and thankfully they were able to say, look, we recognize you're going through this and we're willing to keep your insurance in place to help you get through it. Then when I started looking into the details of the insurance plan, I could get my treatment in Canada, but I would have had to pay for it out of pocket and then be reimbursed. And I think it only reimbursed up to 70%. And so you started getting into the millions of dollars with care, even in Canada with cancer stuff. So it was clearly going to be hard to do it in Canada. I was able to connect with several of the major cancer centers in the country through our US Olympic Committee medical network, which was a cool advantage for me as an athlete to have those kind of resources. And as we reviewed my case, they were giving me the same advice that the doctors I had connected with in Anchorage to kind of vet my options up there. And so then it's like, well, if I'm going to be doing the same treatment no matter where I am, I might as well be in a place where I literally know the doctors. I'm familiar with the treatment center, and I'll have all my friends and family around me. So the only downside was it meant I was commuting for my chemotherapy between British Columbia and Anchorage, which did become a bit challenging when I was going through chemo because my immune system was compromised. And so I would fly with a full on N95 mask, which at the time, we didn't even really understand what an N95 really was. And I was very cautious about keeping myself healthy, because that could have created some real problems. And thankfully I was able to go back and forth for my treatments and make it all work. And I was really grateful that I could go through this major challenge in my life with people that I knew so well. And I was also doing my treatment at the Providence Cancer Center, where my providers were literally in the same building on different floors. So they knew each other, and I was able to cultivate a real team approach, which is not always the case. Sometimes you're seeing an oncologist one place and a radiation oncologist another place, and your surgeon's totally somewhere else, and they don't necessarily all work together. So I felt really lucky that I got to do my care in a place that was so familiar.
And then now that you are removed from your sport, removed from your cancer diagnosis, you're still in Anchorage in the surrounding area and helping with their Nordic Skiing Association. How amazing is that to kind of help the youth that helped you?
It is a really cool full circle moment for me to be back in Anchorage, leading the Anchorage, or the Nordic Skiing Association of Anchorage, which is the program that I did get started in and literally developed through. I started as a young junior Nordic polar cub, and then became a middle school racer and a high school racer. I got to race the popular events. Like this past weekend, we had a 50K event that goes from one end of town to the other that I did as a kid, and then raced Olympic trials here. And so now to be able to have spent 20 years traveling around the world, seeing different venues, different formats of competition, meeting so many people that are connected with various programs around the country, and then be able to come back to Anchorage and take an organization that's been doing amazing things for 50 years, but yet still has so much potential because the sport is always changing. To come back and apply that experience, I can't imagine a better position. And after I retired from racing, it's really been this exploration process of how do I take that 20 years, which is not your standard resume builder, understand it myself, but then also put it into a role that will provide the matchup with my skills and experiences, plus the same passion I had in sport. And so I'm getting to do that all with the Nordic Skiing Association now. And, like any new job, it's a lot of learning. And, I had never encountered insurance renewals before, or, I'm running payroll for 160 coaches. And so I'm gaining a lot of just like hard skills too, through learning, but it's really fun to see the potential here and to help be hopefully a connector in the community to continue growing what we've already got.
What can we look forward to out of you in the next foreseeable future?
Well, I love to talk about this, this grand 10-year plan I made to win Olympic medal, and how, it's all about just make the plan and off you go. And now that I'm kind of thinking about what's that next 10-year plan, all of a sudden I realize that real life is a little bit more ambiguous, and it's a little hard to say, like, what do I want to be doing 10 years from now? But after a couple of years of exploration, going through the cancer experience, going through the COVID experience, my goal really is to keep challenging myself, to keep living each day to the fullest. And right now I have a little boy who's almost 6, and he is just the light of my life. So we're really trying to build our lifestyle around time together, time exploring, and, ways that I can still keep in decent shape, keep doing the job that I love, but really get a lot of family time. And just, you'll never find the complete balance, but I feel like I've helped in the last 6 months in particular, kind of reorient my life around what's most important to me.
And that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that you think that I missed? Anything that you wanted to clarify? The floor is yours.
No, I think it's always good to go to look back and go, what were the real keys to making things happen? You can always learn from situations. And what I've just found is we all have so much power within us. And if we can really start to listen to that conversation going on in our head, which is always better when you're being active. I just feel like that's when you get really creative. Then the things are more important to you, and that's where you find your confidence. And just make the most of every day, because that's what you have. And it's the small building blocks that lead up to great things before you know it. So if you keep doing the right things every day, big futures happen.
I love that. So your interview will come out. Let's see. On the 23rd of this month.
Okay.
So you have a couple weeks. If you can just send me a picture of you that I can use for social media, that would be great. You can DM me or email me.
You're also welcome to just go on my Instagram and see.
Okay, perfect.
Or my website, see if you find something you like.
Sounds good. I'll do it that way then.
That's probably more reliable.
Is there anything else, any questions you have for me? Anything that you wanted to say before we conclude?
That was great.
Awesome. And then between now and the 23rd, if there's anything that you want to include in the episode, just send me a message and I'll put it in the script.
Well, since I did hint at the happy socks, if in the show notes you want to point people to Kikkan.com,
oh hey,
they can get their own happy socks, and they help I donate proceeds to Active Against Cancer. So
oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And then I think we can close up shop for today.
All right, sweet. I'm hopping on to a board meeting here shortly. So
thank you so much for spending a little over an hour with me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Bye.